The love of one's country is something one can't easily describe. But we were a proud people once, and we had a very strong tribe. However, the Ireland I adored is no longer recognisable. The attack on my people is completely unjustifiable. My love for my culture, heritage and people I cannot explain. But an attack on my nation has put my people in pain. The war that we face isn't like wars seen before. No tanks or guns, just smiling politicians that many people adore. They use their charisma and stature to fool the sheeple. They use subtle words like trust the experts to enslave the people. Experts who are bought and paid for to reach conclusions for you. You cannot discuss or debate whether the conclusion is true. The media will say it's necessary because the individual cannot think for themselves. In many cases, this is true. I ask you right now to take a look at yourself. No arguments allowed, nor will debate. Expert class rules in a communist state. You see, our country and nation is under occupation. Our indigenous peoples is under the process of forced assimilation. The enemy who attacks us are the heads of the state. Those within our dial, our people, our culture, they hate. The societal changes is made by psychopathic Marxists. Those that fight back are labelled far-right racists. Ideological subversion to brainwash the majority, mass conformity and groupthink kicks in and attacks the minority. Those who can see through the deception, it's imperative that you call out the lies of the establishment's narrative. They have made the people believe that 2 + 2 = 5. If you don't believe me, well, let's take a deep dive. They have convinced the masses that a man can experience pregnancy. They have bypassed all logic and sense of reality. We give foreigners homes and resources that we can't give to our own. Irish brothers and sisters aren't even allowed to mourn. We are told immigrants that come here, we cannot begrudge, because our ancestors before us had some sort of white privilege. Famine and wars our ancestors harshly faced, but thanks to our education, true history has been erased. The communists love to stick labels on everything. With Project Mockingbird, the actors and media go into full swing. Repeat a lie enough times, the lie becomes the truth. Those who question the lie, the establishment will mute. The government and establishment don't like any flack, so they use their thugs on Garda Síochána to attack. Those who will defy to comply to the state. Rules created to cause division and hate. Divide and conquer is the oldest game that they play. It keeps us weakened nation to my despair. Debate and discussion is no longer allowed. Dare if you wish, the establishment will make you an enemy of the crowd. Courage is in short supply and the Irish really need some. If we can't lose our fears, we will inevitably lose our freedom. Fear is what makes many good people hide. But with your ancestors' blood, we can restore Irish pride. Politicians, journalists and NGOs are traitors of our country. Once we rid our land of these snakes, Éire will once again be free. Éire go bra. Take one frog and put it into cold water and add boiling water to it. The frog will jump out. However, if you heat the water very slowly, the frog will just sit there and sit there and sit there all the way to 100 degrees centigrade. Of course, we're a lot smarter than a frog, aren't we? You see, communism is that boiling water. People will never accept communism outright. So instead, the government adds more and more socialism, slowly and slowly and slowly, till there is total socialism. Total socialism is communism. People will watch more and more of their freedoms eradicated. They will see everything that their ancestors fought and died for being eradicated. For communism to succeed, the nation has to be destroyed. Socialism is the trap to enslave humanity. Socialists believe that communism and socialism is the creation of the workers uniting, rising up against the corrupt bankers and the greedy political system. For the best part, they believe capitalists are the enemy, and in truth, they are. What these socialists and Marxists do not realise is that socialism and communism were never the creation of the people to overthrow the greedy capitalists in the political system. It was the creation of the greedy capitalist and political system to overthrow and enslave the people. That is why in all communist regimes, the rich get richer and the middle class and the working class get poorer. You will own nothing and you will be happy. This is why all left-leaning Marxists throughout history revolted against the regime they helped build. They believed that in this new utopia, that the communists will give them security and stature because they fought hard to bring about the communist state. But those who financed the communist revolution were never really socialists. So once the Iron Curtain comes down, the useful idiots are no longer useful. How has Ireland got to where we are today? The answer: the slow eradication of everything that made us who we were. We have turned our back on our people, on our nation and on our heritage and culture and our race. But how can government achieve this without the people knowing what they are up to? How can they get away with this without the entire nation revolting? There are two answers to controlling a demoralised people. 1. Keep the mass distracted with endless amount of bread and circuses. The circuses of the football and rugby arenas, and just enough crumbs of bread to keep the people above water. As our politicians and journalists become millionaires, the people fight about how much their neighbour gets of social welfare. And 2, of course, divide and conquer tactics, which never fail. If you collect 100 black ants and 100 fire ants and put them in a jar, nothing will happen. But if you take the jar, shake it violently and leave it on a table, the ants will start killing each other. Red believes the black is the enemy, while black believes the red is the enemy, when the real enemy is the person who shook the jar. The same is true in society. Man versus woman, black versus white, straight versus gay, religion versus science, etc. Before we fight each other, we must ask ourselves, who shook the jar? Throughout history, governments have ruled and dictated its peoples, whether it was in ancient Rome, Mao's China, or Soviet Russia. Tyrants have ruled by either force or psychological warfare. Ireland has been going through something of an identity crisis for decades. But it's only really now people are becoming aware of it. This is simply because so much of what has traditionally been known as the Irish identity, traditionally known for centuries, have been quickly eradicated in a short space of time. Religion, family, and a sense of community were all core pillars of the Irish identity that swayed the direction of our wonderful nation. But our desire for our national sovereignty and the protection of our unique identity has been frowned upon in recent years. There seems to be no more Irish pride in our communities, as our expert class have socially conditioned the mass population through the use of psychology and the indoctrination through the public school education system and through our mainstream media and entertainment industry. All these deep state tools have conditioned us to leave the path of our basic morals and the love of one another. The international criminals have made us care more about the world's problems than that of the local community problems, while the Irish family unit struggles to heat their homes and feed their children. The politicians and journalists tell us it's our duty to take in an unlimited number of economic migrants, many of them without any vetting, and give them shelter and resources that we cannot give to our own 14,000 plus Irish homeless. You see, in the late 1990s, early 2000s, a neoliberal progressive culture what I like to call cultural Marxism, swept through Ireland at warp speed with a clear goal to show the deep state how a formerly conservative religious nation could be brought to its knees and do a complete 180 and become part of the modern world and reflect more modern values. A globalist, multicultural Ireland. However, the last few years have seen the rise of protests against this vision of the country that's being shaped by these internationalists. A pro-Irish nationalistic movement by those who haven't forgotten the fundamental principles of our ancestors. Charity begins at home. Cash is king, and beware of the stranger. The neo-Marxist liberal progressive movement that seemed to have zero resistance till recent years, a movement created by people who absolutely hates everything about our race and our culture, who believes they can shape what Ireland should look like going forward. But this has now collapsed thanks to a nationalist revival. This collapse of the Marxist revolution, however great, has left a void in Irish politics and society itself, and how Ireland is shaped going forward is still very much up for the grabs. This is the real fight that is taking place in Irish politics right now, the fight for what Ireland as a nation will be in the future under an international multicultural environment, or a country shaped by the Irish indigenous people and how they wish Ireland as a nation is going to reflect. What exactly is a nation, you may ask? Well, nations are formed because there's a collection of people who share a common culture, history, language, ethnicity, religion, morals and ethics. These people then agree to form a nation because despite the vast array of differences between individuals, they all have enough in common to believe that what they share is a general vision of what's best for their people. A nation dies when its people no longer recognises the importance of family and also forgets the basic principles of their ancestors that who created the nation. Up until the 1990s, Irish people had a fairly strong sense of who they were and in what they believed in. A primary driver of our Irish identity was our Catholic faith. For centuries we had been made second-class citizens in our own country because of our religion. The Catholic faith was shunned for years because of centuries of British oppression, and then later on the paedophilic scandal. Unfortunately, this scandal, which happened within the church, was the final nail on much of Ireland's faith in Christianity. Our identity, such as our language, was as good as eradicated. Ireland, unlike most countries, doesn't have a general left or right wing government. The only two parties that ever existed in Ireland really were Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, who are virtually identical on all political philosophy and policies, except where they disagree on certain things over 100 years ago on how Ireland separated from Britain. And now the so-called opposition party, Sinn Féin, who were known as being pro-Irish nationalism, is more resemblant of an Islamic terrorist organisation. Along with its Marxist philosophies, it is more anti-Irish than it being a pro-Irish political party. You see, every political party in Ireland is fully controlled by the deep state, pushing internationalist policies and international culture, aka multiculturalism, which knowingly eradicates our national culture and our national identity. Irish nationalism began to fade away because simply the Irish people forgot who they were and what our ancestors fought and died for. And with that, international organisations such as the United Nations and the European Union became heavily involved with Ireland's policies, and it started to shape Ireland's culture. These organisations believe that they can simply decide the direction of our country, as we simply outsource all our nation's identity and culture to whatever the dominant ideology at the time is. And that ideology right now is left-leaning, neo-Marxist, liberal progressivism. Since the millennium, the Irish political class have been almost entirely in lockstep with international institutions like the EU, even when the people clearly weren't. Even instances such as the Lisbon Treaty, where because our political party didn't like the answer we gave them, they made us vote again. We did not want the Lisbon Treaty, but we were forced to do so, to take it against all legality. And since then, all parties such as Sinn Féin and People Before Profit, who had mild elements of Euro-scepticism, are now extremely pro-EU membership. Ireland was the only country in Europe without a right wing or any Eurosceptic element within our government. We were told that we needed to make way for a new modern Ireland, which is to reflect the same cultural values as the rest of the Western world. Things like tolerance, multiculturalism, feminism, diversity, pro-LGBTQ equality, and all the other buzzwords you can think of. Now, in regards tolerance, I am tolerant with almost anything, unless, of course, that I'm forced to change my morals and my beliefs to accommodate someone else's feelings. Multiculturalism is the eradication of the Irish culture. The more dominant culture, such as Islam, will always eradicate a Western culture. Those who come into Ireland needs to adapt to our way of life. We do not need to adapt to theirs. Diversity is simply an attack on the indigenous people of a country. Diversity hiring means picking someone for their race, sex or disability and not the best person for the job. Give the blind black man the job of flying an aeroplane instead of the white male with 30 years experience. LGBTQ Marxist cult claim that they just want to be accepted, yet they pride down every man, woman and child's throat. Pride parades dictated to the mass. Why? Because two men decide on having sex with each other? This really reflects the state of progressive society? Most people would tolerate this if they'd done this behind closed doors. After all, what two consenting adults get up to is none of my business. Whether it's gay sex or a man dressing up pretending to be a woman. Like I said, it's no business of mine. Nor is it the business of our children. But the LGBTQ mob, they want to normalise all adult sexual deviances to our most vulnerable in society, our children. Why? Because it's a Marxist pedophile cult. Queer theory is the normalisation of all sexual deviances to our young children. The change of Irish morals was most clearly shown in Ireland with two major referendums, one on gay marriage and the other on abortion, which both passed with huge majorities reflecting the vast change of culture within our society. These referendums also held extra significance because they became two instances where national pride was now deemed acceptable again. You see, the Irish people are still a proud people, but when your country sidelines its unique national identity and instead favours becoming more a conformist nation, the proud nationalists are now very much deflated. But in these referendums, Ireland got international headlines, global praise, you would say. And for once, there was a sort of a feel-good factor that the vast majority of those who supported these Marxist causes felt. To this, the majority of the Irish people discovered that we could create an identity not by being different, but by being the most the same as all the other progressive multicultural countries. We were going to be the most progressive, the most tolerant, the most pro-EU, the most pro-LGBTQ, the most anti-fossil fuels. We were to have the longest lockdowns, have the highest vaccination rates and the most oppressive hate speech laws, taking the most refugees also. We were going to be the best boys in the class, the teacher's pet. The Marxist communist wet dream of Europe, whatever the approved position was, we were going to be the best at it. Push pedophilic content on our schools and libraries? No problem at all. Every politician, every journalist, every government institution, NGO, trade unions, and of course the state communist actors, anti-fascist Axion, every single one of them got right behind it. The progressive vision of Irish politics has gone virtually unchallenged for decades. That is until 2020 reared its ugly head. The COVID crisis, combined with a massive increase in immigration, has caused a near universally held consensus of what Irish political system should look like. All the parties pushing all the same international policies while ignoring community and national policies for years. But in the last 4 years there's been a growing ever more vocal discontent in the direction that this country is going, and people are questioning the progressive direction of many things, including modern art. Bambi Tugg, who isn't even a decent singer, but the praise she's receiving at the moment of all journalists, it's comical. She is now pushing the ideology of queer pedagogy, which I said earlier is the normalization of all adult sexual deviances on our children, along with the satanic ritual that we see. Ireland has now joined the top ranks of the Luciferian communist revolution. The question I asked earlier, what is a nation? Well, it's simply shared culture, history, language, ethnicity, religion, morals, ethics. These are the things that make a nation and a people. But thanks to private school Marxist indoctrination, if you ask a young person what are Irish values and morals, they will list buzzwords like tolerance, diversity, inclusion and equality, like they are reading a brochure created by a multicultural corporation. Ask them what Irish culture is, and they will say that we are multicultural, which by definition means there's not just one, but multiple foreign cultures. Replacing the native Irish culture your ancestors struggled so hard to preserve. None of these say anything about what makes the Irish people unique, what we believe, who we are, and who we wish to be. So people are rejecting these answers, and so too the progressive Marxist post-national future that's been prescribed to them. This is a war right now that we face as a nation. The war is an identity crisis. Questions that should be asked are, who are we? And should we fight to preserve the identity, nationality and culture and race that our ancestors fought and died to protect? What kind of country do we want to be going forward is totally up to the Irish people, not the internationalists. The Irish establishment would like us to believe that the neoliberal progressive future of modern Ireland, that the communist 15-minute smart prison utopia is inevitable, written in stone, but it's not written in stone. It is written in chalk, and chalk can be erased at any time. I can't tell you what the future of this country is going to be, but for the first time in my life, people are starting to ask the right questions, and that is the first step to making real change a possibility. Éireann go bragh. There is an entity in this world pushing hate, an international elite we will call the deep state. Divide and conquer is the game that they play. Black versus white, straight versus gay. But imagine an Ireland where we all come together, put our differences aside and unite for the better. They try to restrict on how we behave, but in truth they want humanity enslaved. They wage war on our nations by opening our borders like puppets on a string. Our politicians blindly follow orders. Divide and conquer is just what they do. They want to see me fighting you. The war that we fight isn't about race. It's the survival of my people's heritage and rightful place. And Ireland for all is a wonderful theory, but exactly where does that leave my people? I need to query. Multiculturalism and diversity seem to put my people last. Equality for all just seems to want to burn Ireland's past. Our heritage, our culture, we have the right to protect. But racist we are called by those we elect. The nation's people must all stand as one, or Ireland as a nation will be done. Black or white, straight or gay, left or right, standing together. No matter our differences, we must endeavour. The real enemy we face are the heads of the state, standing together and entrusting some fate, that with God on our side, victory is assured. But unfortunately for many, sacrifices need to be endured. The puppet masters hide behind anonymity. They attack our country and our people's vulnerability, turning me against you, turn the majority against the few. Use the mouthful pieces in media to push fear and hate. We must bypass the actors before it's too late. Of this I'm sure we will win. Their narrative is crumbling and failing. They have tried to destroy your fate so they could push division and hate. Good will always triumph over evil. With love in our hearts we will conquer the devil. My country is mourning with the attack on its people, but soon the mass will awaken and no longer be sheeple. We rise with Irish blood and fight for our land. Standing together as one, we will save Ireland. Éireann go bragh.